In the dying days of the Soviet Union in 1990, a cry went out, and it rumbled across the Carpathians and stretched all the way to the Don. This cry was heard across all of Ukraine, and it was a very simple assertion, and that was well overdue, that Ukraine's freedom was about to be born again. Chabinsky's words, written over a century ago and since lost during the Soviet era and replaced with a budget store washed-down Soviet anthem, they rang out, loudly and proudly, with a portrait of Taras Shevchenko and a stage awash with yellow and blue. That cry began right behind me, in Lviv, in this astonishingly gorgeous concert hall. Although illegal, they did not care. It was time for revolution and independence. We start our journey in Lviv, the great western city of Ukraine that in my opinion is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. Over the years, the city has been known by many different names. In German, this was Lemberg. In Polish, it was Lvov. In Russian, it was Lvov. Shockingly different to Polish, I know, they were very unique there. But its true name, and its native Ukrainian, is Lviv, named after the son of King Daniel of Ruthenia. Lviv is such an important city for Ukraine. It's the first stop after crossing the border at Medica, where aid arrives, and where visitors arrive to Ukraine as well. And it is the region that during the 19th century birthed the modern Ukrainian nation-state and its movement. And before that, this is the region where the Kievan princes held out following the Mongol hordes ravaging of the east to form Galicia-Volhynia. This is the region that has resisted Russification the hardest, and it is the region that safeguarded Ukrainian culture when it seemed that like all was lost during the Russian Empire.
It is hard to understate just how important this part of Ukraine is, and what a rich and fascinating history it includes. Lviv is a relatively happy place, but we see at every street corner reminders of the war, reminders of the pain that these people feel every single day. A statue or a building covered in sandbags, a church boarded up, a funeral service for a body never recovered, and of course, the field of Mars, where those who understood the price and the cost of freedom lay forever, visited by loved ones and friends, but forever entombed within the land that they died for, alongside centuries of their ancestors who died for the exact same cause. Everything changed at 4 a.m. on the 24th of February 2022. When the so-called Big Brother nation of Russia, under the orders of nothing more than another dictator from the dustbin of history, crossed the internationally recognized border and tried again, as Muscovy has for centuries, to destroy the gates of Europe. There have been so many crimes against humanity that we have lost count. Their meaning has been numbed to us. But we should take a moment to reflect, to see what these people who outwardly show faces of joy have been through, to see what shame the Russian state should be feeling. Places and names that will scream throughout the ages alongside those such as Katyn, the Killing Fields, the Trail of Tears, and so many more. Keep these names in your minds as we continue through this video. I can't sit and even begin to name them all, because this video will be hours long. Hours worth of just naming horrific crimes against humanity, while Russian state media still ask what should be done as a final solution to the Ukrainian question. This is the reality that Ukrainians have lived with for 2 years now, but in real life, they've lived with for centuries. Hostomel, Bucha, Irpin, Borodyanka, Kramatorsk Station, Mariupol Drama Theatre, Novokakhovka Dam, Izium, Okhmadit Children's Hospital, and of course, Kharkiv. The thing is, you come to Ukraine, you come to Lviv, you see Lviv. It's a city behind the front line.
well behind it. To truly see the reality of what the people in this war have gone through, you have to come to the great fortress in the east. You have to come to Kharkiv. So that's what we've done. We've come here to where the civilians were shelled, killed, bombed, still are bombed, every single day of the week.
The reality of war is that there are, like every war, many fronts. Lviv is very much the home front, the great keep in the west that ensures aid arrives. The reality of life in Kharkiv, the great fortress in the east, well, it's quite different. Kharkiv was founded in 1654 as a great fortress city on the steppe, designed to protect the region from raiders and ensure the passage of trade. She has since been burned, bombed, beaten and broken over the years, changing hands multiple times during the Second World War and our recent history through a long slog of brutal combat. Today, Kharkiv is the second largest city in Ukraine. She was supposed to fall on the first day of the Russian invasion. 3 years later, Kharkiv stands, not just as brick and mortar, but as an immovable people united in their love for freedom whose spirit is unbreakable. Through centuries of brutal Russification, the language spoken here dips between Russian and Ukrainian. And don't fall for the propaganda that you can't speak Russian in Ukraine. To our taxi driver who took us from the train station, I said spasiba, thank you in Russian. You don't get thrown into prison for speaking Russian in Ukraine. It's ridiculous. And is a stupid lie that is perpetuated online constantly. Make no mistake though, these people are not Russian as you just saw in my piece to camera as I was walking through Kharkiv. And if you try to tell them otherwise, you might wish to take out some health insurance. This is the front, the great fortress in the east, and this is the reality of life in Kharkiv.
And you will now hear from a Ukrainian woman called Anna, who's lived in Kharkiv throughout all of this, whose neighbours have been killed, and who understands better than most what the Russian future is.
So, could you tell me a little bit about yourself, how old you are, if that's okay, and what part of Ukraine do you come from?
So, my name is Anastasia, I am 30, unfortunately for me, and I was born in Kharkiv, and it's pretty east to Ukraine, quite close to Russia, and yeah, most of my life I've spent here, pretty much, in Kharkiv.
Now, a lot of people say that because you're from Kharkiv, and a lot of people in Kharkiv speak Russian, that you are just Russian. What do you have to say to them?
Well, that's pretty damn fucking stupid if you think about it, because speaking language doesn't really make you a certain national, obviously. So people who in Canada speak English are not English, and people in Canada who speak French are not French, they're Canadian. So it doesn't apply for some reason to us, and I don't know why exactly, but the reason why I speak Russian, and I spoke most of my life, Russian, because first of all, my family comes from Georgia, and I grew up in Russian-speaking city, and most of the eastern Ukraine has been Russified due to Russification, which happened during Russian Empire and kind of continued during Soviet Union time. So it wasn't really a choice for most people to speak Russian. It's just something that was enforced, and Ukrainian was pretty much removed as a language from this part of Ukraine. And yeah, it's just the only reason we speak it is because of the Russification and because we were born here. That's it, pretty much. It doesn't make us Russian, just make us Russified Ukrainians, if you will.
That may be all well and good, you might say, asking someone who is a civilian, a volunteer, yes, but a civilian, what their opinion is. But what about someone who is actually on the front every day? We ask them too, just to really make sure that those watching this can understand. Just because you speak a language does not mean you are of that culture or of that country, and it does not give that country the right to kill you for not wanting to be a part of it.
What language do the Austrians speak?
German.
German, yeah. And what language does the Americans speak? English? So maybe it's like United States are English country, or Australia maybe it's English, or Canada is maybe, yeah. And Austria is German. But no, we don't say that there is no Austrians, there are no Americans. Although we know the history from the United States, and we know that United States was gathering of different peoples there. Irish, Scottish, English, yeah, and Indians who were there for centuries, they were just put back by Europeans who went. So It's just because people in the United States, they don't really get it, what is it?
But why do Ukrainians fight? What makes them get up every single day, go to work, volunteer, join the military, go out on missions with sometimes barely to little support, knowing that it just simply must be done? What motivates them? We asked our soldier friend, and we asked Anna too, what motivates them? What gets them out in the morning? What makes Ukrainians fight every single day for the chance at independence when it would be so much easier to just surrender? So much easier just to throw in the towel and secede just a little bit of land to give Russia what it wants. Why do they stand up when everyone screams at them to give up? And on that topic, why do Ukrainians fight? And why is it worth it to keep fighting?
Well, there's a lot of reasons why, obviously, but the main reason is, first of all, it was a long road since Soviet Union times for us to better ourselves and to become a place worth living in. So there are certain things that we care about, such as our culture, our music, our language, our poetry, our everything that has to do with culture. But there also is liberty, there is democracy, there is freedom of speech. There's a lot of things that were kind of denied to people for a very long time, who suffered under like communism or totalitarian regimes of sorts. And to us, losing means losing pretty much every single thing of that and everything we value. So it's not even about the national aspect to many people. It's mostly about this, like preserving things that we care about and all of those things Russia does not have, and Russia destroys actively in Russia itself and other countries as well. And of course, if an invader comes to your home and kills your loved ones, destroys your cities, kills your neighbors, and spits on literally everything you care about, then it's a pretty natural reaction of people to be against that and to fight to stop that as well. Never mind the fact that obviously in Russian captivity and Russian occupation, the treatment of people is, some would say, worse than death. So that's also a pretty good reason to fight, I suppose. But mainly those ones, I say. Yeah.
When I made the claim Anna understands better than most what it means to lose loved ones, I wasn't saying that hyperbolically. I didn't reveal it till now because I wanted you to see her on screen, to hear her words before I said it. But this video is actually dedicated to her father. Her father is the man you saw at the start, a Russian-speaking Ukrainian who was murdered by a smirch, simply as he sat above his garden. Her mother was wounded, quite severely, but survived due to the fact that she was inside, simply on another side of a wall to her husband. Anna showed us her family home, charred and destroyed by the war. She also showed me the aftermath of the missile strike. I think it's something you need to see. As we sat down with Anna, it should be noted that this was midway through the Russian attempt to attack the Kharkiv Oblast, again through Vovchansk. At the time, the Russians did occupy the city of Vovchansk. As such, it was really hard to find some time where we could just talk without being interrupted. But I'm going to play through the remainder of our interview with Anna, and you're going to hear firsthand just how hard it is to grab 15 minutes to sit down and have a chat with someone. In this city before the war that had a population of 1.5 million people. Just let that sink in. And what keeps you going every single day with your volunteer work?
Mostly it's just it's kind of like silly reason, but mostly it's just happy smiles of like soldiers when they receive things, and me playing some sort of part in what they're doing, because the hardest work is theirs. Obviously, they're, you know, soldiers fighting on the front lines, and I'm not, but something I can do is help them and to make their very difficult, truly horrendous lives that they didn't want, that they didn't choose, but they had to because Russia invaded. Then I can at least elevate some of their discomfort. I can help them. I can do something to help them defend me and my city and my country and my people and my family and my friends and, you know, pretty much everything. So that's what keeps me going. Sometimes it gets a bit, you know, a bit hard, but when you think about how they live in the trenches and everything, you think, I'm fine. I live in an apartment under the roof. So far, has not been bombed yet. So yeah, I think about them mostly when I'm trying to do my work.
A lot of people say that Ukraine should just give up a bit of land to Russia. So the Donbass, Crimea, even Zaporizhia and Kherson, the occupied territories, hell, even Kharkiv, they say they should give up. As someone who lives on the front line and has effectively lived on the front line the entirety of the war, even since it began truly in 2014, what do you have to say to people who say, just give up a bit of land for peace?
Well, first of all, I would like to point out that it's not just land, it's people who live there, people who are currently occupied. And to turning your back on them is, in my opinion, not exactly the option. We have a bunch of, people in Zaporizhia, in Kherson region, in Kharkiv region that are still living under occupation. So it is their fate there is just being isolated from the world, being prosecuted, tormented, denied rights, denied any access to literally anything, poverty, everything you can think of. So, of course, that is the most important thing to me. But also the next most important thing is giving away narrate, it seems. Giving away territory would not work simply because they will just use it to attack further. And there are no guarantees currently given to us by anyone in the world that can really make us sure that us stopping now, for some reason, never mind the fact that Russians don't want to stop, they're actively trying to occupy Kharkiv region again. So it's not like they're showing any signs they want to stop. But even if we did want it to stop, it's just doesn't really make any sense, because it will only...
While that's going up, do you want to say exactly what just happened in the background?
That's what happened is a pretty common thing. It's a air raid siren. It means that Kharkiv region is under bombing. Either glide bombs or missile strikes, or might be Shahed drones from Russia that Iran sends to them. So this usually means several things. One, it's either some city or town in the region is getting bombed, or Kharkiv is going to be bombed. So usually this kind of means that you would be advised to go to corridor or some other place to just hide from shrapnel at the very least. So, Kharkiv have been bombed pretty much every day for April and May. So now we have a little bit of a break in a couple of days. So that's nice, So fighting for us means basically the only option for now, because we have no guarantees they will stop. We have no guarantees they will not continue the invasion in like 5 years, 2 years, 3 years. And we only know that they will be much more prepared, much stronger, and have more weapons to do it. And who will then protect us? Nobody. Yeah.
Do you believe, and for you personally, will you keep fighting even if the entire world turns its back on Ukraine and says you're on your own?
Yeah, I think so. Most people will, but it depends. The only thing would happen differently is that it will be much harder. So it will be much bloodier, we will lose more, it will be much more of a desperate effort than it is now. But essentially, not that there is any choice. Like, what is the choice? Just, death is preferable, in my opinion. So, yeah.
And if you could...
Oh, by the way, the only thing that would convince me if my people don't want to fight. So if like soldiers obviously say, fuck that shit, we're not gonna fight anymore, then I have no right to tell them otherwise. But as long as people in my country want to fight, then I will support them until the fucking doomsday.
And if you could say anything to people in the Western world, what would it be?
Well, it's a usual kind of message. I mean, I do think that it's very important for the world to see what is going on, because this is not just because it's my country, it's my home, but it is the biggest war in Europe since Adolf Hitler. So because of that, it's quite an important event, I'd say. And Russia is a threat to not Ukraine, just Ukraine, but also to Georgia, but also to Moldova, but also to Kazakhstan, to pretty much every other post-Soviet, quote-unquote, republic. But it is also a threat to Europe in general. So we are sort of like a meat wall right now between Russia and between the elves, as we say, between the Western world. So it is in everyone's interest to support us and to make it stop here, so it's not your loved ones that are getting killed by artillery shells, but it's ours, just with your money and with your help. So I think it's a fair trade, in my opinion. So yeah.
And one last question as well, it's really just opening the floor to you. Is there anything particular you'd like to say or add?
Anything particular? Well, I mean, as much as we understand, obviously, that world is a complicated place, there are like a lot of economical things, like economy, like trade relations between all sorts of people, like, but it does feel a little bit odd to be fighting the country 30 times our size, literally, and with just as much more army as we have, being literally sponsored by China, Iran, and North Korea. And it does feel a little bit like that's the world sees us as just our problem. And I would love people to understand that it's not, and that that's quite important to not let this sort of thing happen and then it turn into fucking World War III. World War III that people are so afraid of now, and they talk about it a lot, like, oh, we shouldn't escalate, and people should know that that's what happened before in history as well. We do feel a little bit like Czechoslovakia in, like, you know, before World War II, because people also decided, we just give it to Hitler and everything will be fine, and nothing was fine, and it's not gonna be. Russia has an appetite that it needs to be cut out. It needs to be stopped now, here, and decisively. And otherwise, you know, nobody wants to live like we do now. So I would love the world to not suffer like this. So the least you can do is, you know, at least talk about it, and also, of course, help us out. Vote for people who are, you know, are pro-Ukrainian aid and want to help us out, because this has been a rough years in this country. Yeah.
I also asked that question to the soldier I was interviewing. What would you do if the West abandoned you? This is just as the US Congress had finally approved the aid package that would provide further artillery shells. His answer was sobering, and it was blunt. In many ways, they feel like the West already has. The question I've got here, I'm going to skip ahead towards it because I feel like it matches up with what we're talking about here. Will you yourself, would you keep fighting even if the entire world, so there was no more Western aid at all, everyone turned their back on Ukraine and said, no, we don't care anymore, you're on your own?
Since it was like December when we felt that we don't have enough artillery shells, the situation in Avdiivka, for example, went so bad only because we didn't have enough 155 artillery rounds. So, and guys were still fighting. The thing is, it's like philosophical question, you know. We just lose, and will be destroyed. Country will be captured. Every Ukrainian will be told that he's not Ukrainian. Every military will be execution. So the thing is, it's not about Western aid. It's about does Western society ready to let Russians to tear apart Ukraine. That's all about. When we're talking about militaries, they'll do everything they can with what they have. So if we don't have lots of high technical stuff, we'll fight with just ordinary machine guns, with rifles. So
we would just fight with machine guns and rifles. Pretty blunt, pretty simple, but makes no qualms in saying it. No matter what, they will keep fighting. This sort of brings us to the end of our time in Kharkiv, spending time with Anna, and of course, even though the interview occurred in Kyiv, the sniper that we were interviewing, he's actually from Kharkiv itself. After a night that included a significant amount of time hiding in a bathroom during air raid sirens because, well, there's no time to get to cover, you just sort of put four walls between you and hope for the best, we headed on the morning train to Kyiv.
Ukraine is now in its third year at war, and quite frankly, we've stopped caring. Ukraine has become in the West nothing more than a culture war tool, as the young progressives have moved on to a new hobby, and the conservatives have continued to prostrate themselves on the altar of nothing more than Kremlin propaganda. In doing this, we have forgotten the fundamental point that Ukrainians are people, just like us. They want nothing more than to live freely in a land of their own, to make their own choices, and every single day they are murdered for this outrageous crime. This crime that we in the West have had given to us freely. None of us have had to make a sacrifice. In many cases, it wasn't even our grandparents, but our great-grandparents. To them, it's Tuesday. So with that in mind, I came here to Ukraine to talk to the real people who live this war every single day of their lives, who fight in their own way, be it on the home front in Lviv or on the front near Kharkiv. And lastly, this story takes us to Kyiv, the capital, the mother of all Rus cities on the Dnipro. This trip through Ukraine has taken us from Lviv to the Carpathians, east to Kharkiv, and we finally find ourselves here.
In what is, historically speaking, the foundational city of the entire Eastern Slavic world. This is a mythos that resonates both in Ukrainian history, but also in Belarusian history, and of course, Russian history, which has tried to co-opt the notion of being the center of the Slavic universe. Kyiv is an absolutely gorgeous city. Its history is storied. It was here that in 2014, just on Maidan Square near Mariinsky Palace, below the hotel we ourselves stayed in, that the entire world saw Ukrainians stand up and proudly proclaim that they were European, they were not Russian. Make no mistake, Maidan was not only a Kievan event, it occurred across all of Ukraine. But it is here that the images that we saw of the protesters standing together and belting the national anthem at the top of their lungs took place. It was here that the world changed for Ukraine. That the gates of Europe, for the first time in history, slammed shut completely to the east, opening instead to the west, the direction in which Ukrainians wanted to go, the direction in which has been held against them by their former so-called brother nation, who cannot handle being told no, who cannot understand why a people who have been oppressed by them for centuries don't want to be a part of them. There is nothing more evident on what the Russian world is than the disaster that occurred in 1986 at Chernobyl. Note that I am using the Russian terminology here, Chernobyl, not Chernobyl. There is a marked difference between using Ukrainian and Russian, but the disaster that occurred here in Chernobyl is a uniquely Soviet and modern Russian disaster. The fatal flaw in the RBMK reactor design was covered up by the state security to save face, Because the state must always be powerful, the state must always be correct, the state must always be righteous. There is no greater statement to what the Russian future under a totalitarian, despotic regime looks like than this city. Because it is the future that faced the Soviet Union and made it crumble. It is the future that emptied its stores and let its people go hungry. This is what Ukraine has rejected. This is what they have stood together for 2.5 years and screamed at the top of their lungs, we reject.
So what's the best way to end a video on the reality that Ukraine is facing? Is it to go to Kharkiv? Is it to go to Kherson? Is it to go to the front, to Odessa? No. I think the best place to end it is Chernobyl. Pripyat. There is a reality in this. Although this disaster occurred in 1986, it just occurred due to Kremlin incompetency. It occurred due to the way that the Kremlin treated Ukrainians, Ukraine, the land, this very homeland of the Slavic peoples, Pripyat. You may remember when I started my series on the history of Ukraine, I mentioned that Ukrainians and Slavs in general come from Pripyat. They come from where I am standing now. There is a poeticness to the fact that the Russians and the Kremlin made this land uninhabitable for 20,000 years. This is Russisky Mir. This is the Russian past. This is the Russian future. Life does not matter to the Kremlin. Life matters to Ukrainian people.
We see how life matters every single day in Ukraine, and I saw it myself every single evening. Every day, as Laserpig said, they go out, they party, they have a drink, they eat food, they spend time with each other. And as curfew rolls around, they hug each other goodbye, tell each other they love each other, and then hope that that evening it is not their home that is hit with the missile. The simple fact is, people will go out of their way to watch out for their fellow human. Of course it is a human society, yes, of course there are bad people, it's a matter of fact. But when you look, and I mean you truly do not have to try hard to look, you see so much good. You see nurses and carers working in conditions where they need twice to 4 times as many staff, and they're doing it for barely any pay because the vulnerable people they take care of need to be taken care of. You see firefighters running into buildings that have been hit knowing full well there is probably a second missile on the way, but just knowing those few extra minutes can mean the difference between getting one of their fellow citizens out from under the rubble and them dying. It does not matter what happens to them because they do it because it is the right thing to do. You see volunteers from all around the world running to and from the front lines. You see Ukrainians, those who have been wounded horrifically, coming back to volunteer to run supply missions. Our driver to Chernobyl was one such Ukrainian, horrifically wounded during a combat, but still driving all of the supplies he can to and from areas that need it the most. You see so much good. You have care homes that have barely anything, saying, no, we don't need any more. We've got enough. Give it to these people instead. There is so much good to be seen. There is so much happiness and there is so much joy. But it masks an incredible pain. It masks incredible loss. It is a spirit that has only ever really been seen in the West during a few key events in our time, such as the Blitz and the bombings of London during the Second World War. They keep calm, they carry on. But know it is a mask. A mask for a kind of pain that we do not understand. And how could we? You may say, what about this place? What about this other place in the world? What about this? The simple fact is, we are letting this happen. Our government officials are allowing this to happen. We could end it in a matter of hours. But we let it happen. Because for us, for every single one of us who live in the West, it is better to sacrifice 44 million lives just so we can save 50 cents a litre on petrol. 44 million lives. 44 million stories. 44 million heartbeats. 44 million dreams. To save money at the petrol pump. I feel ashamed. I question how our leaders can live with themselves. I question how anyone can make that moral sacrifice and call themselves a Christian or a religious person at the end of the day. 44 million, whose crime was simply wanting to live freely with self-determination and the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We said never again. We failed. That is the reality of the life of Ukrainians. That is the reality of what it is like living in Ukraine. A mask of joy on incredible pain. So that was about a 37-minute video. Not the shortest I've done, and you guys are getting spoiled a bit lately as I do longer and longer videos, but I wanted to do a bit of an unedited piece to camera, and I'm 100% copying my Scottish swine friend here at the end of his Ukraine video where he did one as well. Just because I think it's really important to explain why I made the video that I did. I didn't really give you all a point during the video. What was my point? I told you a bit of a history, I gave you some perspectives. I kept bringing back to a point though, and it was reality. What is reality for Ukrainians? There's not really one answer to that. The reality of our sniper friend who I interviewed in Kyiv with Laserpig, full video is also on my channel. It's completely different to the video with Anastasia that I videoed and put onto this video. The reality of their lives is different, yes, as is everyone's, as is my life to yours. But cumulatively, they do live in a bubble. A bubble where, as I said in my summary, there's a lot of smiling, there's a lot of laughter. Ukrainians have a wicked sense of humour. But it's a mask for such pain that you just cannot, for the life of you, begin to fathom. I sort of touched on this in my Holodomor video as well. Sometimes things in the world happen and you can't understand them, and that's through no fault of your own. You're a human. But when we stop trying to understand them, that's when the problem comes. I felt different about my trip to Ukraine after I got back. Even before I left, to be honest, than Laserpig did. He opened up a bit on how he felt. Our experiences while we were together pretty much the entire time, save for a bit where I had a nap after a trip in the gas mobile that he touched on. Yes, I did actually get carbon monoxide poisoning. Our experiences while together, we came away with it with different takes. And of course, that's natural. We're different people. Even if we have a scarily similar sense of humour. The entire time I left, there's a plane going overhead, but, you know, again, like in Pig's video, the airport is literally that way. But I felt a tremendous amount of guilt. I can't even begin to state how much. It was a very strange feeling. I've never felt this guilty in my life about anything before. The guilt I felt wasn't that it was happening. I mean, I'm not pig-headed enough to think that I could have any impact on whether or not Russia decided to invade Ukraine. It's a stupid thought. No, the guilt I felt was the fact that I was going home, that my home was safe, that my home on the other side of the world is completely untouched. Yet my home has the weapons that Ukraine needs to defend itself that we aren't even using. Dozens and dozens of F-18 fighter jets sitting in cold storage, and we're not using them. We've retired them. We've replaced them with the F-35. 48, in fact, I believe, was the last count of airframe. M113s that we were meant to get rid of, that why do we need them? Old frigates that we're throwing away and turning into razor blades. Patrol boats too. Things that Ukraine could use that we haven't even offered. Because we're scared of offending. We're scared of offending BRICS. We're scared of not even BRICS, Russia. We're scared of escalation. I don't think you can escalate more than bombing a cancer hospital full of children. Perhaps it's the fact I'm a father to two very young children under the age of 10. Perhaps it's that, but I don't want to live in a world where it's morally okay to say to my kids, it's okay if you let all of those people die so long as you are safe. Because that's not the kind of world I want to live in. I want to live in a world where you can look at someone and go, you need some help? And give your hand. Because that is what it means to be human. It's why I push all these charity drives and such. It's why, for example, I've been pushing September with my community. One, it's a great way for us to all, lose a few kilos. God knows I need to lose a few more. But it's also a way to bring awareness and to raise a bit of money for people with cerebral palsy. It's why I'm so proud to say that I helped contribute to Horror's fundraiser to send orphan children to school with backpacks full of pencils and pens. I don't talk about the individual donations I make. I don't talk about the things I put my money into because I don't want credit for it. It makes me genuinely very uncomfortable to get credit for doing things. Because to me, when you do charity, you don't do it for praise, you don't do it for kudos, you don't do it to make yourself feel good. You do it because it is the right thing to do. Of course, this may all just be rambly and such, and it is. The whole point of this section is to be rambly. But the guilt I really felt when I left Ukraine came to me and hit me in a wave when I simply looked at the sky in Poland. In Western Poland, as I was about to actually hitchhike my way across the East German border into Frankfurt am Oder, I looked at the sky and I felt safe. And it didn't seem fair. It felt wrong. It felt really wrong. And as I got on the plane back to Australia, it hit me in a wave that it just wasn't fair. All these beautiful people I'd met, all these amazing stories. And in an instant, they may go to sleep tonight and never wake up. All because some tin pot man-child sitting in Moscow, well, not actually sitting in Moscow, probably sitting in his Führer bunker in St. Petersburg or somewhere in the Urals because he's a coward. All because he decided, nah, you're mine. There's a lot to be said about that. A lot. And the simple fact is, if you reason with one dictator, you give pause to make others think they can do whatever they want. Why die for Danzig? I didn't think we'd live in a world again where appeasement was considered the best option. And you may say, oh, what about the nukes? What about the nukes? Oh, wow, what about the nukes? Do you really, and I'll leave you with this, do you want to live in a world where someone can hold you to ransom and kill every single one of your family members and your entire country because they have a weapon that the people that can stop him from killing you all are scared of? If not Ukraine, when? Georgia? Moldova? Finland? Mongolia? Kazakhstan? Taiwan? Malaysia? Thailand? Estonia? Latvia? Do they have to get to Berlin before you stand up and take notice? We don't have to go to war. I'm not saying we should go to war. War is horrible. But we can stop this. And I don't think I will ever feel comfortable in my gut knowing that we have let this happen. So together, I want to thank you all for the effort you're putting in to help all of us to just make a little bit of good come from the horror. I'm very proud to say that this community put towards the bus fundraiser for the Bill Shannon Care Home a significant amount of funds, and together we've managed to ensure that that bus is now being delivered and those disabled children and young adults are receiving therapy and care. There will likely be another 24-hour live stream later in the year, towards Christmas time, still sort of working out the logistics. But I just want to thank you all. And yeah, not as fun as Laserpig's video. We did all the comedy skits for his. But I still appreciate it a lot. And I really could not have done this without him. So, on the off chance that you're not subscribed to Laserpig, do it. Even if you don't agree with what he says, he's a fantastic man. He's genuinely just a very good person. So that was Richard. Richard Woodruff, Laserpig, Horia on Twitter. These are some people you should be supporting. They do what is right. They request and expect nothing in return. And of course, support Anna. Follow her on Twitter and check out some of the awesome stuff she does. She just received a commendation that is very well deserved from one of the brigades in Ukraine. I'd like to take this moment as well to hope that wherever he is, her father is at peace and he can see just how amazing his daughter is and just how much his memory will never be forgotten.